Hey folks, Steve here with a very special video for you today. We are going to begin looking at Mark Herman's Empire of the Sun, the Pacific War, 1941-1945. And honestly, you could definitely say that I'm way behind the times on this one, folks. So here's the deal. This is what we're going to do with this one, guys. I don't think I'm going to go into great depth all about this game. I feel as though if you're in the wargaming community, the only way you're not aware of this game is if you live under a rock. And so I don't feel a need to create a great amount of introduction, other than to say it is a card-driven game that features hexes, which is a little different than most card-driven games, but is designed by the great Mark Herman here, and is actually a game that I've had for quite a while. And I've even owned it long enough that I got rid of one version to get the newer version, and yet I still don't have the latest version. So this is the 2018 printing, which means there could be some slight clarifications that are not in my rule book, but generally this should match the game as is. I've fiddled around with the South Pacific cutout game from the magazine of C3I, but for whatever reason, over the course of my time, I've not done more, in playing war games, I've not done more than fiddle with this game. And it really felt overdue to give it a shot because it is a well-regarded game. I'm not going to do a review at the end of my coverage because I feel as though I'm not going to add much more to the game commentary for this game than has already been said for years and years and years. There are great learn to play videos, so I'm not going to teach you how to play the game. There's also in-depth reviews and stuff out there that I'm not going to match. But I did want to play the game myself, and I wanted to play it solitaire, and I've got a couple of aids to do that with, which is what we're going to be doing here with this playthrough. And so there's not going to be... Here's the thing. I just want to play it for me. I wanted to play the game. And sometimes I do that, and I don't record the video, and you guys never see me play a game. But I realized I don't really cover CDGs on the channel very much, even though I'm a pretty big CDG fan, generally speaking. And this just felt like a good one to hit, given that I've covered, the Pacific War and the Axis Empire stuff, and just like we've been here before, but this is kind of considered like the game on the subject that is good quality and can be played in a reasonable time frame. So I figured if I'm going to play it, and I'm going to try to play it the way that I'm going to play it, I might as well record commentary along the way. This might have very little utility to most people, but that's okay. This channel is really fit for a very particular viewer, and I don't care how many views I get on these videos. I really don't. So if it's enjoyable to you, great. If it's not, then that's okay. Go watch other stuff. I'm not offended by that. We'll try to navigate our way through. I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes along the way. It's not going to maybe go to plan. I don't have much of a plan. I think I have to learn this system appropriately, and I have not properly done that. I have stumbled around, but I've not quite mastered it. And I'm very much used to playing this war in different contexts of systems. So shocking that I've not played Empire of the Sun, but would it surprise you to learn that I've played Japan and World in Flames multiple times? So I'm not totally unfamiliar, but unlocking the secrets of the card play and running operations in the system is definitely going to be part of my my challenge. Now the other thing is, just like when I play World in Flames, the most like nerve-wracking part of playing Japan and World in Flames is actually getting to the 1941 time period, where you need to decide when you're going to go, where you're going to go, and how hard you're going to go in those places that you're going to go. And that tends to be like a sleepless night, fraught thinking through what you want to do and hoping that you've lined up your production such that you're going to do the things you need to do. A lot of that goes away in a game like this, where we start at the 1941 or January 1942, depending on how we want to actually get started, with a lot of the war in China really handled off game in many ways. It's sort of abstracted out. So we're really focused on the Japan versus the Commonwealth and the United States, basically, for the vast majority of the game, beaten up on the Dutch East Indies. And so I don't have to worry so much about production. I can focus on the gameplay, which is good. Though the challenge still remains like, where do I want to go? How do I want to go? How hard do I want to go? We still have those options. So certainly want to get into the Dutch East Indies to get the resource hexes, the oil hexes, so that our hand size is protected. I would love to be able to say force a surrender of India, even China, though we'd be engaging with the oddity that is the China offensive mechanics. And just what else are we going to do, right? I mean, that the perennial challenges for Japan remain the same here. Now, looking at the reinforcement schedule, obviously, Japan will be disadvantaged over the long haul. So they're going to try to do what they can, take what they can, dig in, hope for the best, as the massive onslaught of replacements and new units for the Allies becomes an overwhelming amount of stuff on the map. There is actually a fair amount of stuff on the map here, guys. Like, we've got a lot of track marker stuff, plenty of that, and then we've just got a lot of units out here. And it's hard to kind of grasp really like what everybody's capable of. And I feel like it can feel a little overwhelming. That's probably why it took so long for me to actually get to playing this way. But I've kind of learned with the rules, consuming the rules and understanding what's going on. Like, the HQs matter most. And at the beginning, the Allies have HQs in Hawaii, unsurprisingly, up here, which they'll get hit with the Pearl Harbor attack. There's a HQ in the Philippines, which will get disrupted pretty early on, depending on how hard we beat up on the Philippines. And then the British Commonwealth, have one in Malaya at Singapore, and that will get neutralized pretty early on. While the Japanese have their South HQ in Indochina, they also have their combined fleet in the Japanese home islands, and then they have the South Seas HQ in Truk. And so the Japanese kind of start with a really nice like HQs kind of in a triangle shape. Track here, doot, 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 that triangle there, where that is going to give them activation coverage pretty broadly. And I just need to be thinking about like, okay, do I try to really push towards Burma and northern India? Do I try to dig into China? And what are the benefits of me knocking out China? Is that even something worth all the expense it would take? And I'll say with the hump Burma road situation thing, like there's no hump, but the Burma road is open, meaning it is actually going to be pretty hard to succeed at China offensive. So there's just a lot of choices here that we're going to have to work out. Now, I am playing this solitaire, which means I have a lot of different ways I can choose to do that. I can just play that as an open hand and just do the best that I can. But amusingly, Empire of the Sun actually has a number of fun options, and I'm going to use a weird bastardized version of both to play this because I don't, I'm here for the experience of playing the game. However it's going to run. So I'm going to move the camera here just a little bit so you can see what's going on. I do have the CDG Solo system, originally designed by Stuka Joe and officially supported by GMT. Well, I've gotten that set out, and I have grabbed my Empire of the Sun sheet here. I put it in my plastic holder. So we have this form of solitaire, which is basically like taking a little bit of control, to put it simply, out of my hands and my hand of cards to be on the displays here. It's not all the way set up. We're not like, about to play the game quite yet. I'll probably mess around with the example of play of turn one, playing the Operation Z and the Conquest of Southeast Asia cards to just get familiar again with the processes of the game, which it's been a while since I've played South Pacific. And then we will be, what you're doing is you're filling these slots with cards, and you're rolling dice, and basically like you have some things forced where you may only get to pick a particular card. And if you want to like role play it, it's sort of like this is what the for the allies, the maybe the Joint Chiefs of Staff or Allied Command are presenting as options to use. Like this is what people have come up with. This is what we think might work, and maybe not being able to pick the best card that I would ordinarily be able to pick in an open hand. Same thing with Japan. So both would have sort of that limitation. The other thing that we have, which I'm not sure if I want to even mess with, but there are the Erasmus bots, which you have to use the additional rule book to play this way, where you would be, if you were playing this independent of the solo system, you would be playing ideally one of the sides, and then the Erasmus bot would be playing the other side. And so you're actually playing a virtual opponent. But this takes extra rules reading, and boy, the Empire of the Sun rulebook is pretty robust. So I'm not sure that I'm actually going to use the Erasmus bot this time around, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the flowcharts here to kind of help my decision making in the broad strokes. If you look at like Japan's, let's see what, opening phase, right? There's a list of conditions, things we're going to look at, and boxes that kind of tell us a good order of operations to pursue. I'm probably going to use these on the side. So on any given turn, the broad strategy picked here will include the solo system, and that will just make it so that I have, some choice in what's happening, but I'm pretty far removed from the actual decision making. And what's interesting is, to me, that may ultimately be more of a realistic simulation for me as each side, because not only am I, there's a broad strategy that we're going to be following that makes a lot of, should make some sense within the game context. I'm then also not going to have every option that I want to pursue at my beck and call. And, that's going to be a little bit more like the Commanders of the Time. You can certainly form a strategy, you can form a plan. You may not be able to do everything that you want to do. I think that will be just fine, because I'm just going to say, hey, whoever wins, wins. We'll see where the dice take us. We'll play it through and see how it works. And I won't feel bad playing a real opponent and disappointing them with being a terrible opponent, making it too easy on them, and saving myself some some pride in the solitaire experience of this. Generally, like as a CDG game, this does feel like a more complex CDG game, and so uh, ultimately, like it's going to be harder to just grab an opponent to play. I could use Vassal Online, whatever. This is my game. It's a toy. I'm going to play with it thus and enjoy it for what this is, as a pretty good, maybe even the best strategic level uh, rendition of the Pacific War. Now, there was a part of me that wanted to go play Mark Herman's Pacific War, the more operational oriented game. That was actually my plan, was to do that instead. But a part of me just said, hey, you know what? Like you got to play the game that you've owned for much longer, and will help give you some better appreciation for the detail of Pacific War later, even if it came first in Mark Herman's design chronology. So I'll be pretty happy with that. And given that this is a maximum 12 turn game, this will not be a terribly, terribly long game to play, though I'm not going to show every counter move in my coverage. So as you're hearing this, again, like we're 14 minutes into me just talking about the game. If this doesn't sound entertaining to you, do not watch anymore. Please do not do that. Do not torture yourself. This is not for everyone. But I'm going to talk about probably each turn, or maybe a couple of turns per video, and talk about what is happening and the successes along the way. My sort of abbreviated format, there's too much going on here to show every counter move, to count every movement point, every activation, to show every single card. We just can't do that, guys. We'd be here forever. So I'm going to try to play through just as we go, um, and there'll be a cut at some point here, either in this video or the next, where we will have transitioned to what is officially turn two, the January to April turn for 1942. But I want to play again through Operation Z, the first two cards here, for 1941, because one, I don't think I would ever want to do these two cards unassisted by the example of play, because there's just too much stuff going on. Stuff going on. Like the cards activate like 32 units. Like, okay, I'm gonna activate 32 units. Like that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with and keep track and know what's going on. I would probably always play this if I were to ever play it more than right this second. It would always be a 1942 scenario start, because I just have no interest in trying to recreate 30 units of craziness every time. Just, this is the big stuff, just early big stuff just kind of finished out, and now the game is the challenge of what comes after. And I feel a little more comfortable with that myself. So anyway, um, yeah. So what I'm going to do from here, if you're still watching this, right, is I'm going to go play through the example of play. I'm not going to record me doing that. I mean, it might be nice to have a recorded version of the example of play, but I'm not going to bore you. You can actually read that example of play in the rules book PDF that you can grab from GMT's website, like right now. And if you follow along and read that and maybe set up your own game and do the same thing, you're just going to experience the exact same stuff. I'm going to be like looking at the counters. I'm going to be figuring out, well, if I was actually just playing this, maybe we can talk about this after the clip, after the cut. Like, how about that strike on Honolulu? Like, is there any better result that we could have ever expected to get from that? But probably not. And just so you see kind of how this is set up, the carriers, the American carriers are out here away from Oahu, and they're going to be, I would have to assume, out of the engagement with Honolulu in Hawaii itself, just period. And then let's see what Oahu, and then everywhere else, as you might imagine, there's some weak units in the Philippines that will get traded away eventually. We have a bunch of these single step, single strength Dutch East India units, which will not be hard to shut down. And then the Commonwealth has a fair number of strength points in sort of northern India, in Burma. Obviously, there's some stuff in Malaya proper, and then even down here with Australia. But they're not going to be able to respond, obviously, until the card play actually picks up. So if you were the Japanese player and you're saying, well, I want to do something ahistorical, you could start this turn one and just decide to do something different. And for those who want to find like the optimal opening moves, I think there's a lot of C3I articles and videos from Mark Herman about all the opening things that you could do that would be really interesting. I'm going to just skip through that to turn two eventually. So I'm going to go play through that, guys, and I'll let you know how I feel. I'm going to like carefully read each card, carefully move the units, really think through, what other big opportunities would you have had if you had done something else. We'll review that commentary, and then that's going to be the end of this video. So if you've stuck through to 19 minutes, which just turned 19 minutes, I can't imagine this video is going to be much longer than like 10 more minutes. So this is going to be like a 30-minute intro video, just, hey, we're doing it, we're going to figure this out. And then we will dig into things proper in the next video, where we'll be at turn two, we will have drawn our cards in the solo CDG system method, and we'll start, crawling our way carefully through this game and the solitaire solo rules, all that good fun stuff. So yeah, let me go take care of that, and we'll see what happens. So as I'm still playing the example of play, I thought I'd just at least record some thoughts about kind of the way the example of play sets us up for the future and the historical situation. So we played the first card. Okay, I'm just playing through the example of play. There's no way for the Japanese to do much better attacking Pearl Harbor other than if you were to roll your own die and get a natural 9, and maybe you would choose to eliminate more of the naval units at Oahu, but I don't know if that's even the choice you would want. It is nice to knock out, American air power, so I don't know. But as we go into the second card, right, this is the first theater, and I would have to imagine, right, like you might as well treat each of these operations as their own thing rather than to do like every step of the sequence of play, given how one-sided it is. So if you read the comprehensive example of play, you're kind of doing things out of order of the turn order, but the sequence of play. But I think that's okay because there's just so much going on. You might as well do it if you're going to bother to play turn one. Just say, hey, I've got an operation here. We're gonna move and operate with all these guys. So the main thing is, and I've already played through this for Malaya. So if you're doing your own comprehensive example of play, this is the end of the Malayan section, and we're going to get into Borneo here in a minute. But the main thing is that we are forcing an activity here where we're forcing the Force Z unit to move into Malaya. The rule being on the card, if we enter a Malaysian coastal hex, which sure enough, here at Kota Baru, that's what we would get, and that by moving here and not anywhere else closer to Singapore, that means the British, the Commonwealth air unit can't support. So that's a great way. You draw out Force Z. We're supporting with this air unit. We had the Congo involved, and that's almost no matter what you roll. And I did roll dice, like there's nothing to be done. Like Force Z will simply be defeated. And then we move, we will have moved, this army, shipped it into this hex, and there was really no danger of that unit being pushed back because the Japanese are going to win the conflict there and then be the ground combat will be automatic basically, and then we have the otherwise the movement of the other very large army groups of Japanese units, kind of spreading into Siam and then walking down the peninsula. And so if we were to break this out, right, we've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our 26 activations for the Malayan campaign or the Malayan operation. And if we think about what we did, right, like we drew out Force Z, kind of made it an automatic victory. I can't imagine if you were playing this like on your own, you would do it any other way, because it is just so good to be able to knock that force out without much contention. And then we have basically 3 Japanese steps in Malaya marching towards Singapore, and we would need to follow this up with further play. It'll be interesting to see if this actually does map to the turn 2 setup, because I'm going to have to adjust the map to support that. But off to a good start, right? And it's like, why did we set this up? Well, okay, we captured these points of interest hexes along in Siam leading into Malaya, so that helps. We've got a clear supply line. We're not really in danger of having anything cut off at the moment. We control the air bases and naval bases behind us as we move down the peninsula towards Singapore. And then we have a blocking force there in Burma, and we're not really in danger of getting outflanked just because it takes a lot to try to move through these hexes. These just green plain ones are not clear, they're mixed. So they cost, I believe it's 2 movement points. Yeah, 2 movement points, same as jungle actually. So they differ maybe a little bit in combat purposes, but but the British really can't like outflank us in Siam, um, and that's about the extent of it. And even this is kind of the weirdness of the rules where if I'm very used to a game like Axis Empires or World in Flames, where like you literally like you have the map of the terrain, you can just go and do what you want to do. Here, this is a conceit of the abstraction of China. We can't enter these hexes as Japan over here. So like these guys can move out, they can maybe cause some trouble eventually, but there's not much for them to do. They can hang out in Kunming, or they can saunter out of that southern China area, but the Japanese cannot follow them. I feel like it's a little silly to have such an arbitrary rule, but you kind of need to have it given the way the rest of the war in China works in this game. There it does look like there's going to be a like China War variant that somebody has developed that could maybe show up in C3I in the future. I think that'd be really cool. But we're going to have to deal with that abstraction and just know that we can't really get in there and mess with the Chinese directly. We can at best defend against these units, the Kunming units, and then fight the war with China offensives otherwise. So that holding force, here basically we don't have the bridge over River Kwai card yet. That's just a holding force. We can eventually push into Burma, though it's going to be probably tough going there. And then obviously the British have more forces near India and need to think about whether or not they want to build the transport routes up there to keep the Burma Road open, because we could see the Burma Road closed if the Japanese push in through here. So in terms of like why did the Malayan campaign work out this way in game terms, besides all the historical backing, like okay, we're near the resource hexes, we're near Singapore, we need to shut down Malaya. We've got a holding force at Siam that's kind of protecting the backfield of French Indochina. I'm a little worried about like China up there, but I don't know that I need to worry too much for the moment. We do have the benefits of some intrinsic defenses over here, but I will eventually want to stick somebody in Hanoi, I think. But yeah, that's the Malayan bit. Pretty straightforward. Let me go take a look at Borneo. I kind of got a little little too easy for myself here. The Borneo operation was really simple. It was the remaining units in Kamran, in French Indochina, and just a quick pullover with our special naval landing force, and we take the resource hex. So we get another resource. That's good. That's great. We're going to want to keep grabbing resource hexes to support our economy and have good cards, or decent number of cards over time. This was a freebie grab. Like there's no way to really stop this. And so we just ran over, across the water, dropped those guys off. And then the ship returned back to French Indochina. Now, it's kind of interesting to think about, like, as I'm even comprehending the strategy of the game system, like, you can have your naval units go do the thing you want, and then in post-battle movement, you're going to put them back someplace. So I think it's important to know where you're going with your units, but maybe just as important, if not more important, is where are you going to put them when you're done? And so rather than leaving maybe naval units exposed in Borneo and our main base of operations operating here and in French Indochina, like we came over, dropped off our Marines, went back. And as best as I can tell, we're leaving the Marines in place there based on the example of play. So that was an easy one. So now we're going to look at the Hong Kong operation. The Hong Kong operation really wasn't much to get excited about. It was really just activating this half-strength unit and moving into the hex for combat. And unfortunately, while they do have a -2, because technically that hex is mixed terrain, unless you roll really, really poorly, you're going to get... it's very likely you're still going to get at least one. Well, I guess you have to roll pretty good. in what I found. So you would, if you have a -2, you need to at least, to eliminate the unit, you need to do at least one step loss, which means you could afford to have a 1/2 result, but if you got a 1/4 result, that would actually not be enough to take the hex, I don't think. So what would happen is, even if you did one step, uh, the defending British unit that gets eliminated here doesn't have enough strength to actually hurt you back. So long as you do one step loss, they're going to have to retreat. There's nowhere to retreat out of Hong Kong, and they get eliminated that way. So only if really rotten luck would you not be able to take Hong Kong, and obviously sending the unit right next to Hong Kong, like, it just makes sense to clear that out. So that's an easy one. So these operations, like, this is the most complex so far. Easy, even easier. Now we move on to the Philippines operation, which is a lot more complex. I think we've used 5, 6, 7, 8 of our 26 activations. So we still have 18 to go, and we're going to probably need a number of them to get rolling into the Philippines here. Okay, well, now hitting up the outcome for the Philippines operation, certainly the most complex operation by far in this example of play, using 11 units all coming from, I guess, 2 different directions, ultimately coming from the north and then from, essentially the east, operating out of Truk. Or not Truk, I'm sorry, Palau Island. And what's interesting is, if you were to roll the dice for this one, the results actually could be a lot different. So if you were playing turn 1 and you were just going to naturally play through it, and you try to do anything similar to what is the setup here, you're going to find you could end up with a really different result. Like, I think in the north, probably under-rolled, like the Japanese didn't do as well as they probably could have. Though they still get the hex, they still get in a pretty good position. I think at the most ideal situation would have led to maybe the 2 air units here, the American ones, the one there now in Manila, and then down here in the islands with the Dutch. Ideally that we would have just knocked both of those units out. So, like, that would be the optimal roll. I think that's achievable. Not getting a half result, but a whole result would have been ideal. And then that would have deprived the U.S. of the air units in the area, and then really giving air superiority. What's interesting is the need, and I think if you're really walking through this in the rules, appreciating the fact that, like, yeah, air superiority, naval superiority are going to give you the combat bonuses that essentially you need them to negate the penalties from terrain and from the amphibious assault, which is going to give the defending player a +3, which is really strong. And then, considering your ground units defend at half strength when you're doing an amphibious invasion, I mean, it's definitely hard, right? So, like, this is obvious stuff, but in the mechanics of the game, if you're trying to amphibiously invade someplace, like, your units have done defense, and your opponent's going to get just a straight up +3 to their die roll, inflicting high casualties, and then the terrain's not going to help either, and so you really are going to be trying to increase your own bonuses so you have some kind of parity. And what the Philippines operation can help show, and, like, I'm not running through it, but I'm explaining, like, the value of it, is to help show where you need to take some chances, and sometimes you do get a bad die result, and it can mean the difference between, like, air superiority in the region or not. And in this case, like, we do have air superiority generally, but it's not as though there are not going to be enemy air ZOIs, depending on how the rest of the turn and the play goes. And then, interestingly, this is also a good example of the usage and the example of play of a unit that really is like staying far away and is basically getting a pot shot on those defenders at Lady, where there's no really way for the Japanese to be harmed, so they're going to go do some damage and then they're going to collect themselves at Davao. So just looking at like what did the Japanese accomplish here, like they've landed multiple units in the Philippines, they've gained control of some airfields and even a naval base down here, which is going to enable them, essentially to operate at will in the surrounding area. And we can continue to look at the Dutch East Indies as an eventual target point, but really needing to shut down the Philippines very quickly. And ideally, we're going to be projecting enough zones of influence to get it to where we're going to be cutting the HQ tracing for what's in Manila. I think that's kind of the goal of what they're trying to shoot for there. So, again, you could imagine like if you were rolling this naturally, you could do better in the north, and then even down here, some of the die rolls went so. You could actually do worse down there, and maybe run into a situation where you're not able to clear some of these hexes the way that you would want to, and it might lead to having to try again, which would be a big investment of future cards. So obviously the Japanese player wants these offensives to go very, very well, given their commitment. This is like a good card. You're going to have a hard time following this up with 3 ops value cards and beyond as you go through. So now we're going to steer attention over to the South Pacific operation, which I believe is the last general operation that we're going to execute here as part of this special turn 1 dig, and then we'll be resetting, re-racking for turn 2. So yeah, this is going to include, I guess there's South Pacific and they're treating Wake as a separate engagement. So let's talk about the South Pacific stuff next. The South Pacific operations are really simple. It's just simply leveraging the organic transport capability of Japanese carriers, light carriers, in the APD unit to move the Japanese Naval Marine, Special Naval Landing Force or South Seas Detachment units. And basically we go nab Guam right up there, right? And then we nab Rabaul for basically nothing. Like we just hop down, we grab both of these places, we keep this transport with, or rather the cruiser, with the detachment here in Rabaul itself, which is indeed a naval base and air base. And that's it for the South Pacific operation. Now you talk about like, why do the thing? Well, yeah, Guam sticks out as a base of operations that could be used. It's an air base, which would prove to be an annoying thing if the U.S. player, the Allied player, were to get some Allied bombers into Guam and then, basically creating zone of influence issues. So it's an easy just grab it, remove it from the Allied play. It's going to be that much harder for them to project or cover their own zones of influence or be able to trace supply to the Philippines or elsewhere. So I guess that's a good grab, right? And again, I'm talking not just like, of course, in history and in deeper strategy like Guam, Rabaul are important grabs, but in Empire of the Sun game terms, we do want it to be meaningful to grab these locations. Obviously, Rabaul gives us an opportunity now to project control into the Solomon Sea, and we can start eyeballing other places like Guadalcanal, Port Moresby, and beyond. Though, I mean, just looking at it right now, I don't think the South Seas Detachment would be, able to take out Port Moresby, so they're going to need some additional support as we go here. That's just sort of the reality of it. So finally, we have the Wake Island operation, which I've got my rule book here on a stand helping me out. But we are going to look over in this direction, so you'll understand what we're shooting for here. But the Wake Island protection over here is actually reasonably weak. We should be able to knock that out, and we will with the example of play. Well, if you're familiar with the example of play and in history, you know that the Japanese actually don't succeed, and in fact take some losses here with the Japanese unit, and everyone's going back home to Kwajalein. Now, this is what's interesting is if you're playing this turn one yourself, you would almost expect, or you maybe should expect, that ultimately the Japanese would win this one out. So with the +3 for a surprise, even rolling slightly better than I guess what the example of play die roll in history was, they should not do a half amount of hits, but a full set of hits, which would be enough to remove this unit and destroy it, which then would lead in the ground invasion. I mean, you could still say roll 9 and achieve 4 hits to damage, the Marines, but otherwise, it would be much higher likelihood that we would have both the air modifier and the naval modifier. So much better chance ultimately of achieving a ×2 result, maybe. And if that were the case, a ×2 result, or even if it were a 1.5 result, which would not be that terribly hard to achieve on a die roll, that would have been enough to eliminate this Marine unit, and then by default the Japanese take the Hex of Wake on turn one, rather than what this is shaping up to, which is we're going to need more support, and as the example of play explains, on the next turn, right, the Allied zones of influence would apply, and then we would, I don't know what's going on with the brightness of my recording, guys. There's something, I'm using a new phone, guys. I'm using a new recording device. So things are going to be a little bit odd. I think if it's, I don't know how to deal with that. Anyway, I think the end result we really need to look at there is that, this is one of those missed opportunities. Whatever we don't get done on turn one with the special card is going to be that much harder to deal with. They will have Allied zones of influence, and we will have the inability to use that same bomber right there, the 24th Air Flotilla, because it was operating at extended range. It could go over and do some stuff because there was not an enemy ZOI. If there was, we wouldn't be able to leverage our extended range. We would not neutralize the zone of influence. We would need an aircraft carrier unit to be able to disrupt, or rather, not disrupt, but neutralize the enemy zone of influence. So this was our one shot for now. Under a different circumstance, you could imagine, we might be sending an aircraft carrier. And the example of play notes that historically that would be the Soryu that we would eventually get into play there and send it over from elsewhere. Looking at the overall game situation here, guys, effectively the end of turn one, this is all just the beginning. What's really interesting is just the comparison of this to other games where in Empire of the Sun, I don't know how often anyone actually plays this turn one. You could obviously opt to do different things with this turn one set of cards. You could play and focus in on an area maybe, or really double down on knocking out the Philippines as hard as you could. Stuff like that, like, could certainly apply, I would imagine, but you're giving up something if you're focusing in only um, one region, right? You're giving up progress elsewhere. So I would definitely imagine many people start the 1942 scenario as their real starting point. That's really where like the game begins because now things are actually in motion. But it's funny, again, using these two cards, like the first card for the attack on Pearl Harbor is so straightforward that it's like, yeah, of course. And then the next card is so complex that if you're not following the example of play, like you're going to have to really think about what you're doing and think that if it's 26, if you think about it, 26 units to activate, you really want to break that down into, like we have here in the example of play, close to half a dozen different operations that are all getting you somewhere closer to where you want to be in the game state. And you're either like on rails or you're going to go hog wild crazy. What's interesting is how that compares to, say, like Axis Empires, where you get your special markers, Z plan stuff, and you kind of just like auto get a lot of stuff in Axis Empires because of the SNLF mechanics and just how you take uh, the Dutch East Indies, where like there's not as much to worry about. Like it's a really simplified model to just get it done. Here, there's a lot more to manage, probably closer to World in Flames, where, I mean, if you're playing World in Flames, you're usually starting from 1939 in a big combined game of World in Flames. And a huge part of playing Japan is just preparing for this, right? What you see before you spend a huge amount of time trying to plan and make sure you have everything that you need. And that's a whole part of the game experience that World in Flames provides. But in a game like this, right, we're starting with the Day of Infamy, not not all the time leading up to it, which means while we do have, thanks to this turn one card choice, like we could actually decide to do something else. It has as much anxiety to me around that as World in Flames tends to do, where like I never feel like I'm ready to declare war, which is intentional, and I never feel like I actually am executing my operations very intelligently, which is my problem. I fear I would have the same issue here if you were just like, okay, Steve, take the turn one cards and just do something different. You're not allowed to read the example of play. I would probably have a hard time figuring out what to do. Like I think this stuff is super obvious. I think going for Wake would be super obvious to me, of like you should probably, based on, knowledge of history and playing other games, I would be trying to pick those up. I'm not sure it would be immediately obvious how to pull off the Philippines operation. I think I'd be screwing that up. Where the Malay operation is reasonably straightforward enough, but I think a new player would like forget to use air properly over here. So I'll just say, like, I think the value in the example of play is very high with this game because it is showing you like how to create an operation, that is, tied to history, but it also forces you to really understand how things work. Like the Malay operation teaches you how to move by transport routes for efficiency, how to leverage air from afar and just get in a position. You start to build on that when you look at the Philippines operation, and then everything else helps to reinforce like the combat charts, where you can see where you can guarantee victory by just looking at the numbers and going, well, even if I roll the absolute worst result, I'm going to do enough hits that I'm still going to flip that enemy unit, and they're so weak that they're not going to flip me back no matter what they roll, or they'd have to roll really high. And the rest of these operations kind of help you to math out kind of what's the likelihood that it should go your way, even in the off chance that the dice screw you and you don't actually get that. And I do have to laugh because there's a great number of these units that start on the map and get eliminated on turn one effectively, especially the Philippine units, Force Z, by the basis of the game. They just need to be included, but they don't get used a whole lot, right? Like a chunk of the counter sheet dedicated to these units that are going to tend to go poof right as you start playing the game. But I think obviously that you wouldn't remove that stuff. But it is interesting how many units are just gone. They're never coming back, and I'm never going to have to worry about them. These, kind of piddly defense force units that are only, they've got decent defense strength, but they've got no offensive strength. So even if the Japanese manage to really screw up the Philippines invasion somehow, like these units are not strong enough at their best to really ever endanger the Japanese in any really meaningful way. So they're almost destined to fall. They're just going to be there to be delaying forces and ideally force the Japanese player to spend as many cards as possible, doing the thing and potentially using precious Japanese steps to do it with, which, that's really going to be their bottleneck. So as it goes for like a learning bit, the example of play I think is really useful. I'm going to start to feel nervous because I'm going to look at like what should be an easy get, right? The Dutch East Indies should be easy to get over and conquer all this stuff. I'm afraid I'm going to screw it up one way or the other, but that's for me to figure out here. So, all right, guys, that's it for this. This is the intro to my Empire of the Sun coverage. Really just talking about trying to absorb the rules and getting through this example of play. I'm going to double check the setup here because I'm sure it's not quite exactly what the 1942 scenario is supposed to be, but I'm going to double check that. We're going to adjust these units and be ready to just kind of restart effectively. I do have the cards prepped on the solitaire displays and all of that stuff. So in the next video, guys, when I can get to that and get it posted, we will start off the 1942, technically turn 2 of 12 scenario kind of restart, playing solitaire, leveraging the CDG solo method, but also using the Erasmus charts to help guide our thinking on what we want to try to do. And so you can imagine, yep, we're going to get in the Dutch East Indies. We're going to, try to figure out how to tie down the Central Pacific and then the South Pacific even, and maybe we need to beat up on China. Who knows? As the Japanese player and the Allies are just going to do their level best to make it painful until we can get more of our reinforcements on map, just as you would imagine it should go in a game of Empire of the Sun. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'm not adding a whole lot of new content around this game. This game has been covered to death. So if you want to stick around, that's cool. If you've been there, done that, totally understand. But we'll catch you in the next one if you so choose. Take care, guys. Keep on gaming.